Hey everyone, and welcome to the GrowLeader podcast. My name is Matt, and I'm so glad you're here with us. Hey, don't forget that all of the information you're looking for about GrowLeader can be found by a quick visit over to GrowLeader.com. You'll find information about upcoming events like our one-day regional conferences. You can access completely free resources for your church, and you'll learn how you can be a part of our monthly mentoring calls with Pastor Chris. GrowLeader.com is also the place where you can find show notes for everything you're about to hear in this episode today. Now, before we get started, we want to give a big shout out to the partners that help make the GrowLeader podcast happen each and every month. The first is the Wesleyan Investment Foundation. For over 80 years, WIF has been helping churches and church planners with their borrowing and their investing needs. Maybe you're a pastor dreaming about how you're going to fund a new building project or other growth opportunity, or you might be at a place where you're trying to decide how to wisely invest and steward resources you currently have. We really think WIF can help you, and you can learn more about them at wifonline.com. We also want to say thank you to Great American Family. Great American Family is America's premier TV destination for high-quality family programming. Great American Family is a part of the Great American Media portfolio of brands and is carried through all major cable providers. You can head over to greatamericanfamily.com to get more information on where you can watch their content. And finally, we want to say thank you to Compassion International. Compassion International has been working to serve the world's most vulnerable children in the name of Jesus for over 70 years. They've helped over 2.3 million children, and they reach and serve every child and family through the power of the local church. The local church here in the United States and also the local church abroad. That's why we love them so much here at GrowLeader. To learn more about Compassion International, visit them at compassion.com. Well, welcome everybody to the GrowLeader podcast, where we grow leaders that grow churches by helping them reach their full potential. We're so glad that you're here today. Pastor Chris, happy June.
Yeah, and I'm in a sweatshirt of all things.
This is a historic moment. This is the first time in almost 3 seasons of doing this podcast that I've been in a collar and you've been in a sweatshirt. And I like it. I'd like to see more of it.
Well, we were actually training a bunch of pastors today, and when I woke up, it was unseasonably cold. And I was standing in my closet, and I was cold. And I saw that sweatshirt. Of course, it's a GrowLeader sweatshirt. Right. So
it's great.
I'm wearing the brand here a little bit.
It is the brand. You look great. My kids would say you're pushing P. It's great.
What does that mean?
I think it's good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Don't go any further than that.
Dad, you're pushing P. I think it's a great thing.
Okay, great.
Well,
yeah. I didn't know what I was pushing, but I glad I am. So.
Super excited about today. Little concerned about where this could go because of our guests, because of the relationship that you two have. But I'll let you introduce our guests and we'll get started.
Yeah, so we've been training pastors here, and of course, as our listeners hear this, both of us are on a break, which is going to be our topic today. How we take care of our souls, how we take care of our bodies, how we get a little rest. We're going to tell a little of our stories, maybe get a little vulnerable, certainly laugh a lot, because today we have my very best friend in the whole wide world, Pastor Rick Bezet, who's, for people who don't know, we actually both lived in or from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and planted our churches on this very same day, February 4th, 2001. And we were ARC Church Plants number 1 and number 1. We always say there isn't a number 2. And so we went from 1, and then to 3. And now, of course, there's more than 1,077 churches planted. To God be the glory. But we were the prototypes. We were the kind of the guinea pigs of the ARC Church Planting Network, and we have been best friends forever. And we were even talking about, before we got on the show today, about what has kept us in the game. Both of us 40 years. We're both in our 60s now. Can you believe that? Woo. And we've both doing ministry a very long time. And the number one thing that we said has kept us in the game has been our relationships with each other and a few other people that we can laugh with, eat a ton of food with. Our families are close. I mean, our kids vacation together. We play a lot of golf together. And we want this for every pastor and leader. And we thought we'd talk a little bit about how we stay healthy and keep our souls healthy. So welcome, my best friend, Pastor Rick. Man, it's good to have you on the podcast.
I'm your best friend, and you're in the top 10 of my best friends.
Thank you very much. Yeah, here we go already, see?
Well, he loves you so much. Pastor Chris loves you so much that in his book, Out of the Cave, he wrote a dedication to you.
I know.
I'm going to read it because the
Oh.
listeners don't know all the history.
Okay.
This is what Pastor Chris feels about Pastor Rick. It says, this book is dedicated to Rick Bezet. For more than 25 years, you have been a faithful and trusted friend. Our constant conversations have always encouraged me. Your positive spirit always lifts me. You're a gift to me from God. My prayer, and then this is true. You've said this to us so many times. My prayer is that everyone could have a friend like you to help them out of the cave. That's a big deal.
Wow. Well, I'm not a writer, but I would definitely like to be able to say something about Chris in the same regard. I mean, you just got to have friends, right?
Give it a try.
He can walk into a room, and if something's wrong with him, I spot it. It's the same with me. He can tell by the way I answer a phone, and he checks on me. He asks me very difficult and deep questions. And how's it going at home? How's the marriage? Why are you working so hard? We track each other. I know where he is at all times. He knows where I am.
Like on our phones.
Yeah,
I
on
know
our
where
phone.
he's at all times.
All times. So like, what are you doing over there? It's like,
I'll see him at a Mexican restaurant. I'll say, and I'll just text, don't eat too many chips.
That's the truth.
It's the truth.
That only happened once. So.
I don't answer those texts. That's why I'm about 35 pounds overweight.
So we're talking about soul care, not body care.
Right. That's
Accountability only works if you're honest.
Yeah, we'll talk about our physical fitness in January. We'll get there. This is about rest.
Yeah,
God.
but this
Right now.
is the month that a lot of pastors are taking some time off, we hope, and we hope they're still listening to the podcast, and if they're hearing this, they are. But we want to give our stories until I had a very rough 2020, 2021. Rick was my person who helped me out of that cave of depression, and I was ready to commit ministry suicide, honestly, and he's one of the reasons why I didn't. He just was there. I'll never forget one day, I didn't even know he was in town. He just got on a plane and showed up, and he was at my house. And he said, "Man, bro, I ain't leaving till we get you thinking the right way." And then he's had a rough 2022, and I like to think I was there for him. But Rick, you discovered some things recently, and you did something that I would probably recommend every pastor to do, and that is to kind of get honest with, like, I might need a little help with this. And you've been in ministry a long time, and you've never once been to a counselor. Tell that story.
No, never went to a counselor, but I love counselors. And in fact, I've advised many pastors to go to a counselor. And then it hit me when I was hurting that I've never been to a counselor.
So back up and tell us why you were hurting, as much as you can tell. Don't get too deep into it, but much as you can tell the listener.
Well, pastoring was tough for a lot of people a couple of years ago. In 2022, 2021, and just a lot of hits, a lot of people who I love dearly, who probably would have spoken they would have had a speech, a eulogy at my funeral, would not even return my text. And they were hurting, and I probably hurt them, but they wouldn't give me any feedback. And these were people that if you want to use a spiritual term, I was in covenant relationship with them.
Right.
We hung out together all the time. Some of them even on our staff, and something got in the way, and they wouldn't speak to me, and it hurt. And I didn't understand how to put the pieces back together. I felt broken, but
there was a series of outside groups too that were kind of trying to pull the church down, and activists. We won't name who they are, but you went through a lot of accusations that turned out to be completely false.
Yeah.
About your members of your family, different things like that. So there was a series of attacks. It wasn't just one thing.
Yeah, and one of your kids is hurting. It's deep, man.
Yep.
And I won't get into all of that, but I will tell you that's when I had enough. It's like, okay, what's going on? My family's now they're so hurt that they're leaving the state.
Yeah.
They're going to another state to try to get air again. And what happened?
That's crazy.
And we're a close family, just like your family, and spent a lot of time together. And it's hard to look into the eyes of a child that you raised, and they are hurt. My daughter, who is the one that got hit the most, and it really made no sense, but she told me the safest place she ever felt in her life was at church. And now the most vulnerable place she ever feels is when she's at church.
Wow.
And,
So you started thinking I might need to share some of this with somebody. Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
had no answers, had a lot of questions, and so I thought, you know what? Maybe I need a counselor. But I want a counselor who can understand what it's like to pastor a church that's growing a little bit and has a lot of, it's complicated. And so I found 3 counselors that I knew based on their bio that they would be great for me. But I interviewed them. I was serious about this. I decided that I was going to meet with a counselor, and everything inside of me, I was going to put it on the table. But I wanted to be around somebody I had confidence in. So I interviewed 3 people. The first one, he was just a little bit set in his ways. Maybe, even to fill out the application, it was a piece of paper. I had to fax it, and I don't know how to do that. And the second guy, he was very kind and very wise, but he listened to me talk, and he goes, "That's precious thought." Well, I don't use the word precious much, so I thought that's not the guy. And the third guy was a coach type guy, very intelligent, and 30 minutes into it, he was correcting me where I was wrong. He asked me this. He said, "Rick, I need to know. I know you like to work, and I know you work hard, but where do you rest? And when do you rest? And what does it look like?" And I gave him an answer, and he goes, "That's not the answer." He goes, "No, it's like this. It's like a little kid playing out in the rain, and his shoes are off, and there's mud everywhere, and he's putting his toes down in the mud. What is toes in the mud to you?"
That's a great question for every listener. Where do you rest?
Toes in the mud.
Where it's just you can be yourself.
And honestly, I started throwing out some answers, but he didn't accept them all.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah. Like for example, I said, "Well, a family night, that's toes in the mud." He goes, "I believe it. What else?" And I said, "Well, playing golf, certainly toes in the mud for me." He said, "No, it's not." I said, "Yeah, I'm a golfer. I just love it." He goes, "No, it's not specific enough." He goes, "If you're playing golf with someone who's a mess, who needs a lot of marriage counseling, you're a pastor. You love helping that family, but is that toes in the mud?" He goes, "What is toes in the mud?" I said, "All right, playing golf with Chris, one of my kids, or Randy." And you go, "Okay." He said, "That's it." I said, "Another thing is Michelle and I like to get away a few times a year to an all-inclusive, and I just love being with her. I love when I drive up to the place and they ask for my passport to prove who I am." I said, "There's something about that moment, the toes in the mud." He said, "Yes." And he said, in order to achieve all the goals that you have, you're ambitious and you're going for it every day. You have to know where toes are in the mud, and you have to fight for that as much as you do your calling.
So Tim, talk to me about some of the areas of your life where he was hunting for wounds, hurts, and maybe even tell them the story of your parents' divorce.
Oh, man.
Because he started now digging through not the recent weariness that we all have and we all need rest from, and you and I are currently on that as people listening. Praise God for that. But the stuff in the past that we didn't even know we carried into our present that happened to us. I want to hear some of the things you didn't know before you started this process with him.
Well, in the side of the story, it's a little bit about my dad, who is a Christian now, and he's doing so well, and he tells a lot of this, to people, But I grew up in a home where my dad was not faithful to my mom. And I was in a couple of situations where I walked into a room and it was well known to me that he was not faithful to my mom. And it was painful, but he was still my dad. And then when I was in the 7th grade, this is where my counselor's name is Randy, and he was digging in. He kept going deeper. I'd never had anybody go into my soul. I mean, deep into my soul. And he said, "Okay, your dad left. What was that like?" And I described. He said, "When did it happen?" I said, "I was in the 7th grade, and my mom caught my dad in some letters in a situation where it was very, very hard on my mom. I was trying to console my mom. I was trying to convince Dad not to leave. He was packing his suitcase. He was putting the suitcase in the car, and I wrote a note, and I put it on the steering wheel, and I said, "Dad, I know you and Mom are not going to make it, but just stay for me and my brother. Just stay for Randy and I." And my dad got in the car, and I thought when he sees the note, he's gonna turn the car off. But he saw the note, and when he saw it, he grabbed the note, he crumbled it up, he threw it out of the window. It hit me in the chest and fell to the ground as my dad squealed out of the driveway and he left, 7th grader, and I didn't see him again for a year.
Wow.
And I tried to track him down, and the next time I saw him was a year later. He was on the side of my grandmother's house talking to my mom, and I saw him, and it was the greatest feeling in the world. I said, Dad, you're back. Dad, you're back. And he goes, son, I'll never live with your mom again. I'm not back. And I thought, gosh, man, what is up with that? Well, my counselor told me.
Yeah, I want to hear this discovery.
Okay. He said it was in the moment when your dad was backing out of the driveway that God called you.
Into ministry?
Never thought, into ministry. Like, it was in that moment that God called me. And it is true. In hindsight, I can see it. But he said, and it was in that moment that God designed your ministry. That you were going to be the kind of person that would chase people down for Christ. Like, if they fall away, you're going to fight for them. Well, that worked well until the pandemic. And then it was multitudes of people deconstructing the word. And then you couldn't find them. You didn't know where they were. And we couldn't meet at church for a significant amount of time and a lot of complications. And I was just chasing these people down. Where are they? Spending hours, and it was exhausting. And that's why I'm glad I went to a counselor, because he told me, he said, look, you don't have a mental disorder, but I thought you would, and I still might find one. You don't have PTSD, although that's still on the table. Perhaps we'll find it.
Yeah.
He said, but I will tell you, you're exhausted. You're done. You've got to get away and rest. So I've never been on a sabbatical before. I've encouraged a lot of people to do it. I know.
You really should have been on one up to this point. And
I know. And so I'm taking a few months right now in June and July, and going to spend some time with my family. And I'm going to have a granddaughter in that time, or a grandson. And so we've designed it all around toes in the mud. That's what it is.
You made this comment last night. You were Pastor Rick shared this story last night with the pastors that were here for the round table. And I think in movies, when somebody tells a story, like I'm in a film, and to think about, this scene of a 7th grade boy and their dad, and I was wrecked. I just was trying to piece all this together. And you made this statement. You said, it's a great goal for all of us. I stayed up last night thinking about it. Be authentic with everybody.
Yeah.
But you've got to be transparent with a few.
You have to.
Unpack that
a little bit.
Well, I'm looking right at the person I'm most transparent with. Maybe outside of my wife, it'd be Chris.
So what does that mean practically for the person listening that maybe doesn't think they have a transparent relationship?
Well, right now, I'm being authentic with everyone. I've told the truth. I'm digging as deep as I possibly can. But it would be ridiculous to be transparent with everyone. And I look at Chris and I let him know, hey, here's what I need you to pray for me, because I'm vulnerable in this spot right now. I need you to stay with me on this. Check the oil on this. That's being authentic, but it's also being transparent. Yeah. And I find, I'll tell you, the pastors that are out there, they're not transparent or authentic. Wow. If you don't have someone to be transparent with, you won't be authentic with anyone. And I find that they're running through life. I've done it too, at such a high rate of speed that no one can check and see how they're doing. Have you ever been with a pastor and you could tell that they're somewhere else? Like, you have a better chance of connecting with them in a text while they're in Zimbabwe than you do sitting at the table with them having dinner, because they're just looking at their schedule, they're moving. And leaders, their doors are open for them, their schedules are full. And but if there's one suggestion I have, is to have somebody that you can take your heart out, put it on the table, and they can see the truth of it. And that's what I've done with Chris, with a few friends. But I even did it at a deeper level because he's a professional, with my counselor, Randy, because he knew what questions to ask on top of the issues that I was dealing with. And so I'm with him now for life. And it's on Zoom call. And I did fly to meet him at his place for a few days. And now we talk on the phone. And
I love that. And I think some people see our relationship. In fact, I know a lot of people see our relationship and there's a little bit of a relationship envy. And we hear that a lot, even when a lot of people look at the lead team of ARC, they say, wow, man, if we could just have what you guys have. And what you have said about our relationship is 100% true. We are very authentic, real. Our spouses know that. Our spouses are close. Like I said, even our children are close, and our kids go on vacations together. So this is a culture that we built in our families and with each other. And so that comes with a lot of trust and safety, but then all the fun side through the laughter. One of the things that you and I were talking about before we started the podcast was, how do you get that? Because pastors are almost saying it in a victimization type way of, man, I don't have that. And both of us agree that, but we put a more into it before we ever expected something from it. And if I was to give pastors advice today, like you're going to have these kind of relationships to survive. This is what's kept me in the game. My relationship with God, of course, first. But man, it's the life of having great friends who you can be yourself, toes in the mud, but also the transparency.
That's right.
But man, we pour a lot into it, what we won't do for each other. And I think there's more expectations of reaping than there is sowing into. And I was on a call with a pastor just 2 days ago, and he just said, man, PC, I'm lonely. I'm just lonely, and I don't know how to do this. And like, he says, I was in a room full of pastors, and I was the only one not talking to somebody else.
Oh,
and I said, but most of those guys didn't wait for somebody to come to them. Most of those guys got up in that break and went to somebody, but you didn't. I need you to start sowing. And it's like it clicked in his mind. And he knew it. He goes, I don't ever sow into somebody else's relationships. Long before John Maxwell was the mentor that he is to me today, I was pouring into his nonprofit, into his events, into if it mattered to him, I made it matter to me. There was more sowing that goes on. And I think that's something that we are reaping from now, 27 years later. And that's what I would encourage pastors in. And I want you to just kind of give your little, hey, pastor, if you want this, and you do want this, and this is how you build it.
It doesn't happen by accident. You have to be extremely deliberate. But I remember when it started for you and I. One day I realized, man, I'm not praying. I'm not seeking the Lord.
That's right.
And I was trying to figure out how long should I pray. And I realized I'm not even praying at all. And I read a book from Dr. Cho on prayer. I can't remember what it was called, but I know prayer was in the title. And in Korea, they would seek God for hours and hours a day. And I thought, man, if I could just go to Korea, maybe I can learn to pray. So I went to Chris. I said, Chris, how are you doing? Are you praying? And this is back before we had a deep relationship. And he goes, not enough. I'm not praying enough. And I said, what? Let's go to Korea. This is what I've learned. I told him all about it. He goes, that's a good idea. But then we counted our pennies and realized we didn't have enough money to go. So we thought, okay, let's scratch that, but let's pray. And we met every morning
at 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Wow. And we called it Korea.
We called it Korea. We're in awesome. Korea.
Yeah. So that was our code word for, hey, you come into Korea tomorrow? And that was was a meeting spot we had at the church where we just met, and then we split up and we went and prayed, and we came back.
Met in the hallway. He would go to his office. I'd go to my office, and we would pray and maybe sleep a little, but mostly pray, and then come back out and then just review what God was showing us. And that's where it started. But that's also where it could have ended. But we just kept it going. Why invest that amount of time without continuing to have this relationship mature? So we look at the calendar at the beginning of the year and try to figure out the times that we're going to be together, or even when we're going to call each other. I don't recall a time where I needed Chris when he said, I'm too busy right now. And I would hope that it's the same. I know I'm a much better friend.
And we literally, we're talking or texting 4 times a week, and then planning trips to play golf. And then we just came out of a ministry experience together where we were helping about 30 pastors together. So all of that combined is what I couldn't wish something more for our listeners today. And we're kind of running out of time, Rick, but I want you to talk a little bit. Did the counselor give you any new information or advice on how to rest well? So not just finding the toes in the mud, but we know what we knew before that, but I know what you've learned through this experience, and I want you to help our listeners on, if they're taking their break still this summer and haven't yet, they're listening to this podcast, what's your advice for them?
Well, he did. He had a lot of advice, and one of the things that I've done right, I prefer to talk about all the things I've done wrong because it would help the people listening.
Good.
But the thing that I did right, just to throw that out there, is that I did have family nights and date nights, and I worked hard, still work hard, but I would play with all of my might. But sabbatical, that's not really just playing. There's a mission involved in it. And so he wasn't legalistic, like with your phone and what you can do. And I think the primary thing that saves me that Randy tapped into is my wife. She's not an enabler. I think every pastor, every man listening, every woman listening, if you're married, is your spouse an enabler? Like if I tell a story from the pulpit and it's 5% off, my wife is going to go, that's not how it happened. It happened like this.
Yeah, me too.
Okay?
My wife too, man.
Well, if I'm on a trip and I tell people, yeah, I just got through resting and I didn't rest, she's going to say, he worked the entire time.
That's good.
Don't let him tell you that. So I think Randy, he got a lot of confidence knowing a little bit about my wife who's going to be with me every step away in this sabbatical. So he wasn't legalistic like some say, get rid of your phone for this entire time, and I'm going to keep my phone, but I'm going to let Michelle have it and then let her look at it and to see if anybody's dying out there, because I'm certainly going to stay connected. He told me, as relational as you are, that toes in the mud is keeping in touch with your friends.
It's good.
Checking on the church, just to make sure, but just don't let the church rule you for this month or two that you're.
I took my first sabbatical in 2011. I think I've only done one more since then, and I'm probably due for. And we're defining that as just extended.
It's just extended.
It's a break, but it's a little bit more.
It's not a
than,
week. It's not 2 weeks.
The first
it's
time
up
I
to a
did,
month.
the most surprising thing that happened to me in my sabbatical was how long it took me to have my real first day of rest. And I defined that as where I wasn't thinking about what in the world's going on at the church, and my brain was trying to solve some kind of problem. And it was 3 weeks before I had my first day.
Wow.
And most of my vacation times were 2 to 3 weeks, which means I was never. My body was on break, but my mind wasn't. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned is what would it take for your mind to check out and be on break, and your heart to check out and be on break, so that your body can fully rest. And I'm telling you, I can't even explain it, Rick. And I can't wait for the day that this happens to you on your sabbatical, because I want you to tell Michelle. I got to call Chris and tell him this, because, bro, I felt a level of rest I've never felt before in my life. I can't even describe it. The level of peace, the level of the soundness of sleep, the level of replenishing. I could feel the replenishing happening. And so even though I was off for 8 weeks, which is how long my sabbatical was, I was really only off for 4, because it took me 3 weeks of rest. And then I used the 8th week to get ready, because when you come back, people want something from you. So you have to kind of start ramping out of it with, whatever message you're going to bring. And so anyway, it's just fascinating. And of course, we want the pastors that can do what we're talking about to do it.
I think, as a staff member, I actually ran into you on your sabbatical in 2011, like 4 weeks in, and I wasn't supposed to, and you had a killer beard. I was like, man, PC grows a great beard. Like, you really rested. You really, was like...
I literally didn't even read an email or a text for 8 weeks. Wow. Not one.
We loved it, though. I was like, man, it's easy. Yeah. The healthier he is, the healthier we're all going to be.
That's so good.
It's going to help us.
And you see the pace that he keeps. He's legit. Like, he works.
He's another level.
So, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, to be honest, I'm just starting this, and I'm intimidated about the sabbatical. I would love to be able to tell you this is cake. I'm gone. No, I don't know how I'm going to do. I think it's very important that I ace this, but I don't know if I will. So I'm going to give it my best shot. It feels like work to go and rest for me.
Well, that's what Hebrews chapter 4 says, is work to enter his rest. In other words, labor. Give it your best to rest. And that's our message for our listeners today is, I hope as they're listening to this, perhaps you're already on a break, but if you're not, listen to me. Take care of your soul. Take care of your body. Have at least 2 or 3 friends that you're completely transparent with, that know your secrets. The way I say it is, you'll always stay as sick as your secrets. So don't have any.
That's good.
Be sure you're telling somebody what you're going through. Of course, include your spouse in on that. You don't need to live a secret life. And but the more you're able to be transparent, James 5:16 says, "Confess your sins not to God, but one to another, to God's people, and pray for each other so that you might be healed." And that's what we would want for every one of your lives. And I really do pray, y'all, you're getting some rest this summer so we can get back at it when the fall harvest season comes, and all the things that are going to happen for us begins about mid-July with Serve Day and for us the Grow Conference and
Motion
Conference after that, and then
21 days of prayer.
21 days of prayer. So we're back at it. So this is a really important season for us.
Well,
to
look, if
rest.
somebody's going to be jealous for something, I think the kind of relationship you guys have is the right thing to be jealous for. And it's a great mark. But love that it didn't just happen by accident. It was intentional. You made decisions. This is 3.5, 4 decades in. This is the fruit of it and what it looks like. And I mean, and just also that, if you're out there and you're not having a quiet time every day, you got to start there, and you need to Sabbath every week, and you need to abandon annually. Even if it's not a sabbatical. I know somebody's listening going, well, I can't take a sabbatical, but you can find time.
That's right.
We can all find time to keep ourselves healthy. And unhealthy leaders are not good leaders.
That's right.
They're just not. And so I've been there before, but we can always get back to a point of health. So, man, thank you so much. We love you, Pastor Rick. You're amazing. If I write a book, I'm going to put you in the forward. It's going to be great.
Let Chris write it.
That's right. Hey, love you so much. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on the Grow Leader podcast.